So our topic for this morning is a big one. We're going to be thinking together about the possibilities and limits of cooperation. As you can imagine through the title of the conference, Cooperation, Why Now? The concept of cooperation is familiar to all of us as humans, always working together with others. But it's fair to say that cooperation is in trouble, if not in crisis, along with the relentless competitions and conflicts in our society and in the world now. Do we have inherent traits of being cooperative? How do our culture and social world shape our human altruism? What impedes cooperation and causes conflicts? What will be the future of cooperation look like? And what can we do to recover the sense of cooperation? So these are some of the big questions we raise today during this timely conference 성균관 University put together. We have two panels in the morning, so I'm in charge of moderating them. In the afternoon, Professor Sung-Yeon Kim will be presiding over the other two panels. Now let me bring your attention to the first panel. And here is the format for running the panel. 40 to 45 minutes of keynote talk by Professor Michael Tomasello will be followed by discussions from two commentators, Professor Sesillia Ri즈웨이 and Professor Emily Liu. Commentators will have about 10 to 15 minutes each to make their case in response to the keynote. It will finally leave about 20 minutes for a conversation period, which is going to be particularly exciting. Our first keynote speaker is Michael Tomasello. Michael is a professor of psychology and neuroscience at Duke University and distinguished visiting faculty here at 성균관 University. From 1998 to 2018, he was co-director of the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Germany. In 2017, he was elected to the National Academy of Sciences and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. His work has been recognized and appreciated by several prestigious institutions, including the Guggenheim Foundation, as well as the public. Tomasello is the author of 9 books, including the famous trilogy, A Natural History of Human Thinking, A Natural History of Morality, and Becoming Human, which is the third and the most recent in his trilogy. The title for the keynote this morning is The Origins of Human Collaboration. So Michael, I'll allow you to take it from here. Please join me giving Michael Tomasello a very well welcome this morning.
Thank you so much. I am just really honored to be here. I was blown away by the commentators you've chosen are, so well-known people on their own, and I'm just really honored to be part of this whole thing, as well as the other speakers and commentators in the rest of the symposium. So thank you very much. I'm honored. Cooperation is a huge topic, and it has so many different aspects and covers so many different parts of human life. And what I decided I wanted to do today was to focus on what I consider, from an evolutionary point of view, the most basic, and that is collaboration, working together, co-labor, working together. Humans are able to put their heads together to do things that neither one of them could do alone. And if you think about most of the important cultural products that we have created, everything from language to complex technologies to complex symbol systems to institutions, they're all collective products. They're not the product of individuals. So somehow humans are able to put their heads together and do things in a way that other species are not. So I want to focus on evolution and also on human ontogeny and ask, where does this come from? how is it that we are able to collaborate? Now, the issue that was brought up, that cooperation is in trouble, is another issue. I would say, right now, the armies in Russia and the army in Ukraine, they're collaborating with their army mates very well for awful purposes, but they are collaborating. And so collaboration can be used for good or ill. And what I'll maybe make a few comments on that, and I'm sure that my commentators will have some comments on that. But right now, I just want to focus on the competency, the ability to collaborate. And let's see if we can get a little bit of understand that a little bit. And I'll make a few comments on the dark side of cooperation as well. Okay, so let's start with our nearest primate relatives, the great apes. So let's imagine that the very, very earliest humans were like chimpanzees, the last common ancestor to human and chimpanzees. Well, it turns out that chimpanzees do work together a little bit to capture monkeys. So you see this red colobus monkey in the middle. And this analysis here, this is a picture from a diagram from my colleague Christoph Bosch. And this is the way he conceptualizes it, that there are several male chimpanzees. It's the male chimps that do the hunting. And they spy a red colobus monkey up in the tree. And one of them goes up after him. He calls that the driver. One of them goes over here and gets in his way, and he calls it the blocker. And then another one waits until it comes. Another one stands on the bottom, and then the other one ambushes it. So he has this interpreted as a collaborative process with roles and a kind of a common goal. I believe that is a human, an anthropomorphic interpretation. I think that what they're really doing is the first one spies the monkey and runs after him. The second one says, he's headed this way. I'm going to go over here and maybe I'll get him. The other one says, well, I'll stay on the ground in case he comes down. And they're each trying to catch the monkey for themselves. They're not really collaborating and playing roles in the way that humans do. So I think this is a overly rich interpretation, and I'm going to try to show you some experiments that suggest that that is true. So this is the cooperative versus the individualistic interpretation. And I'm giving you my view that it's in that what the chimps are doing is really more individualistic. And then let me give you a sort of a picture is that chimps are going after food on their own. And even in the case where they're surrounding the monkey, each of them is trying to get it on their own. So they are acting intentionally and individually. They're reading one another's intention and attention. So they're trying to say, oh, well, he's trying to chase him over here, so I'll catch him over here. But they're mainly competing. All of them would like to get the monkey for themselves, and they would hope nobody else would come and eat it. They want to eat it all themselves. And what we get with humans, starting from about 500,000 years ago or so, is what I want to call shared intentionality, what I have called shared intentionality. So we form a shared goal, a shared intention for mutual benefit. We share attention and knowledge about the situation. And we engage in social coordination, where we try to coordinate. We communicate to try to coordinate. We advertise to the other one what we're doing, so they make it easier to coordinate. So it's really a shared process, where the chimp process is an individual one, even if they're working in a group. A kind of a handy way of thinking about it is the chimps are using one another as a social tool. Yes, they know the other guy is over there, but they're trying to get the monkey themselves, and they're using the other guy as a kind of a social tool. And humans have formed what I like to call a shared agent. We are doing it together. So we are paying attention to this. We have the shared goal, and the chimp is more individualistic, and the human version is more shared. So here's a case of chimp competition. I just want to show you that I'm not trying to say they're not very clever. They are very clever, but they're mainly clever in competition. So this is the situation where you can see on the top of one of the buckets, there's a banana, and there actually is another banana on the chimpanzee side, on the other side where you can't see it, of that other bucket. And the subordinate chimp is behind that door there, and it's going to go down for a minute, and then they're going to compete for the banana. Now you will see the dominant individual is here, is where we're looking from. The subordinate doesn't go for the piece out in the open. She goes for the hidden piece. And the dominant goes over and just checks to make sure. But okay, so the subordinate knows that she can't get the piece out in the open, so she goes and gets the hidden piece. So very, very clever, but it's all competitive. It's all about outsmarting the other guy. So it's all about competition. I believe that in human evolution, in the last 1,000,000 or 500,000 years, there have been two evolutionary steps that go beyond this kind of individualistic competition. One of them I can call collaboration, joint intentionality, I sometimes call it, because it's between individuals. And the second step is a more group-centered way of doing things, which is culture, which is not about individuals collaborating, but it's about a group that has group goals and common knowledge in the group and so forth. And I call that collective intentionality. And it turns out, this is what allows me to do my research. I believe that there are two ontogenetic steps that correspond to these. So from about 0 to 3 years, young children are learning to collaborate. They're working together toward a joint goal. They each know the role of the other one. They're communicating in order to coordinate the collaboration. And then after about 3 years, there is normative collaboration, I was going to call it, with a joint commitment, social conventions and norms, fair sharing, normative protests when somebody doesn't do what they're supposed to do. So 3 years, it's a more group-minded, normative-minded way of working together. So step one in collaboration is, I believe, occurred something like this. There were ecological pressures that made it mandatory that individuals collaborate together to get food, or they would perish. There are a lot of potential scenarios here, but one of them is there was a population explosion of other monkeys, and they were stealing all the fruit, and they were getting stuff that humans would normally eat. And so the humans have to collaborate to get food. Anyone who was not a good collaborator would not survive. So if you see down here at the bottom, I say obligate collaborative foraging. There's interdependence. We depend on one another. And there's partner choice, meaning if you're a bad collaborator, I'm not going to work with you in the future. So we may work together, but if you steal all the food at the end, then I'm not going to choose you for a partner. So individuals who were bad cooperators got selected against, and everyone else was interdependent. And when you are interdependent, it is in your interest to, we all take care of each other because we all depend on one another. I depend on you, and so it's not in my interest to be competitive or to be mean to you because I depend on you. So humans developed this interdependent collaboration, and they weeded out everybody who wasn't good at it. So I think that's the evolutionary event that happened and that led us to be different from apes. So I'm going to show you some experiments with young children, and in some cases, chimpanzees as a comparison, and looking at these different aspects of the collaboration process. First, joint goal and commitment, how we decide to do something together. Second, the roles that we play. We know that in this collaboration, you have to do X and I have to do Y. And then at the end, sharing the spoils in a fair manner, and also excluding free riders. So I'm going to mention each of these with a couple of little experiments. Okay, so here's a little example of an 18-month-old child. Okay, 18 months is very young, just maybe barely started in language, just barely walking, just barely talking. And watch what happens here. This was actually a study that was supposed to be a study of helping. And you're going to see some helping, but you're also going to see some collaboration. So the adult puts away the books, and now he's going to come and have trouble. And the child helps him. And watch, he's going to point. There, they go there. Okay. So he's telling him how to do his job. They go there. He looks to the face. Okay. All right. And so now the adult says, oh, there's some more. So in that last one, the child saw the adult have a problem and then followed in. But now he's coming with some more magazines, and the child anticipates the whole thing, opens it up in anticipation, and again tells him how to do his job. They go there. Okay, a little troubleshooting there. And then the child initiates the closing sequence. So this is the kind of collaboration I'm talking about. We anticipate what the other one is doing. We make our actions clear for the other person to coordinate with. And you get these tiny little children who can't even feed themselves or take care of themselves or do anything. Compared to chimps, they're totally incompetent. And yet they're doing this form of collaborating with others that is unique to the species, is my argument. Here's just another example. This is a little game where they have to coordinate by sending the block down one tube. And he has this can. You can hear it makes a noise. The little child is going to tease him a little bit, act like he's going to put it down the wrong one, but then in the end, puts it down the right one. And now here's the key. Watch. The adult is going to quit playing, and he's doing that on purpose. That's part of the experiment. And the little boy comes over and says, come on, do your thing. He's kind of got his hand stuck there, but he says, come on, do your thing. He's getting him over. So he's encouraging him because he doesn't want to play it alone. He can't play it alone. And so he knows the other guy has to play his role for this whole thing to work. And he can use communication to encourage that. And apes don't do that at all. And one of the most striking, you're going to see a nice case of chimpanzee collaboration in a minute, but one of the things you never see is communication to coordinate it. So one of my books is about how collaboration is the natural home of uniquely human communication, not only language, but also uniquely human gestures like pointing and pantomiming. And so here these children are a little bit older. These kids are almost 3. And we have a collaborative problem for them. They have a stick, and on each end of the stick is a bowl with a reward in it. And the reward is like a marble. They're going to send down in a toy, and they have to pull it together up the steps. You'll see. And the trick is we made it so that one child gets her reward first before the other one does. Whoops. Sorry. So you'll see they're pulling it up together, and the girl on the left, she reaches in and gets her reward. But the girl on the right can't get her reward because we blocked the hole. All right, now she's got it. She's got hers. But instead of going and cashing it in, which she could have done, she comes around and sees the problem. Now she sees that hole is blocked. So she helps her bring it up, and now the other girl gets hers. So I had a philosopher friend of mine who saw this video, and he said, it's not like the girl on the left is really like she's really committed to helping. It's like it's not over yet. We're collaborating, and it's not over until we both get our rewards. That's the idea of collaboration, is that we're working together so that we both get our rewards. When you do this with chimpanzees, we have a version of it where they pull together, and when one of them, the reward comes first, they grab the reward and leave. Right? It's over, right? I'm using you as a social tool. We're pulling together, so you help me get the reward, but then once I get the reward, I'm done. So they're not committed to finishing the collaborative activity until both get their rewards, the way that these young children are. And children, even using language, can make an explicit joint commitment. So this is a collaborative task that has a certain structure to it, which is that we have to collaborate so that one of us gets a reward. So we pull this rope. You'll see it work in a minute. We pull the rope together, and only I get a reward. And then if we pull it together to the other side, only you get a reward. So we have to collaborate, and then I get my reward, and you have to trust me that we'll take another turn and bring it over to yours. So what you're going to see is these two boys, they're saying, here, no, here, no, here. They're each trying to get the other one to pull it to his side, to his own side. But then the little boy on the left is going to make a proposal. Okay. All right. So he makes the proposal, okay, I'll pull it to your side, but then we're going to pull it to my side. Okay. Okay. All right. So this is an explicit joint commitment. It's a contract, if you will, that a promise that will benefit you and then will benefit me. And as you can see in the little graph on the right, with the children, these were 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds, and over 60% of them found a way to take turns. They didn't always make an explicit joint commitment, but they took turns. And with the chimpanzees, we could never get them to take turns. We tried 3 different things, but the dominant would pull it to his side, and then he'd want to keep pulling it to his side because chimpanzees are used to the dominant getting whatever food they want. And the dominant's not used to saying, okay, you have a turn. They just don't operate like that. Right? So taking turns is definitely a way that we can collaborate when only one person can benefit. And we say, okay, well, I'll benefit this time and you benefit next time. And even little kids can figure out how to do that. And when we make the joint commitment, and this is gets over in the direction of kind of cooperation as morality, just look at these 2 bottom panels. The little girl has made a joint commitment to play this game with the adult. And she's done that because the adult says, let's play this game together. Okay. And the child has to say, okay. So now we're committed to doing this together. And then another adult is going to pull her away to a different game. And you're going to see that she has to kind of take leave or apologize. So she's playing. She's committed to playing. Okay, so she's not very polite. The 3-year-olds have something to learn about politeness, but she is making an excuse. So when children did not make that joint commitment, when they were just playing by themselves and the adult was sitting there with them, they never said something like that. They only said that if they'd agreed, okay, to play the game. So the joint commitment creates a kind of a moral obligation to continue doing it, or if you're going to leave, you have to make some kind of an excuse, or you have to justify it. And again, I don't think I probably need to tell you, chimpanzees don't either make joint commitments or make excuses. So joint commitment and giving excuses and taking leave, these are all normative things. And chimpanzees just do not participate in normative interactions at all. And to me, there's only one possible place that normative ways of thinking and acting could come from, and that's from collaboration, where we owe it to one another if we're interdependent, we owe it to one another to do our part. On the cognitive side of things, young children know things about their partner that chimpanzees don't really know. This is the test at the end. Chimp has to play role B. That's where the question mark is. And what we manipulate is that in one condition is a baseline condition where they have no previous experience, and then they just go play role B. And in the other condition, the subject has played role A previously. So they've been on the other side. And the question is, does it make it easier for them to collaborate if they've been on the other side previously? And the answer is, for the chimps, it doesn't matter. And for the children, if they played on the other side of the collaboration, then this helps them in the new role that they've never played before. So they are monitoring the other individual and what they're doing in a way that apes are not. So this is a kind of a cognitive aspect of it that children are doing that chimps are not doing also. And then here, when you see someone not playing their role, you're going to get objections and with actually normative protests. So these children have to pull this thing in together to get the reward. And we have and they made a joint commitment. They said, let's play this together. Okay. Okay. And we've secretly taught the girl on the right to do something different. So she's going to break her commitment, as it were. She's not going to play her role. And you're going to see what the first girl says. First, she tells her what to do. And now one has to do it like this. That's the normative language. You have to do it like this. And in German, you can say one has to do it like this. So this is, you have to pull on the rope. One has to pull on the rope. So this this normative language is not just that I would like you to pull on the rope, or I don't like it when you don't pull on the rope. It's you have to, you must. And that normative is larger than just my personal opinion. It's something that's transpersonal. And so 3-year-olds have entered this normative realm, and they enter it in the case where they're interdependent, where they depend on one another, and they can and you can't let somebody down if they're depending on you. So the kind of structure of this collaboration, I sort of look at like this, that they have a joint goal. They're jointly attending to things relevant to the joint goal, but you have your role and I have my role. You have your perspective, I have my perspective. So this is the kind of structure of the collaboration. The joint intentionality is that it has both a shared element, the joint goal and joint attention, and it has an individual element, the individual role and perspective. All right, so now for the sharing of the spoils, I saved this as one of the later empirical parts because I think if people ask me sometimes if collaboration is so useful, why didn't chimpanzees evolve the ability to collaborate? And you can't really in evolutionary analyses, you can't really ask that too much. You have to ask, why did this species evolve it? Not why did everybody else not? Why didn't we evolve to fly? There are all kinds of things you could ask, but I think one of the things is they don't know how to share the food at the end. So what this is, you're going to see some impressive collaboration, but right at the beginning here, we have the food separated for them. So they're going to pull in this plank together, but the food is there's 2 sets of food, one on each end. So this was done for a TV thing, so you can hear the voiceover. So he knows he needs his partner. He's a social tool. They put in together. Okay, so they really are, I've been in this situation. I was telling you they're not good collaborators, and you're saying, well, wait a minute, you're showing me them being very good collaborators. In this case, where they're each getting their own food, they're each using the other as a social tool, everything's great. Now watch what happens when we put the food in the middle, one pile of food in the middle. The chimpanzees help each other. Now the food's in the middle. Will the 2 chimps still help each other as humans will? The one on this side is the dominant female chimp, and the other one knows she's subordinate, and so she pulls kind of lackluster. One of them creates the planking. But the dominant chimpanzee grabs all the food. Okay, and so on the next trial, the subordinate chimpanzee quits. I mean, why are you going to collaborate if the other guy's going to take the food all the time? So they can't. Chimpanzees are evolved to settle disputes over resources by dominance. And this is getting in the way of them being able to collaborate for mutual benefit. So if you want to get chimpanzees started down the road to collaboration, the very first thing you have to do is get the idea that we're going to do this together and we're going to benefit together. And that's true even if I could beat you up. Even if I'm dominant to you, we're still going to share it. Okay, and that's something they don't quite have yet. So this is really the major impediment, I would say. You can't get started if you can't share the spoils. Now watch young children. These are 3-year-old little German children, and they're pulling in. It's an analogous apparatus, and there are 4 gummy bears in the middle you're not going to see it split. With the chimps, you saw the food split and then you saw it in the middle. This is only, you're going to only see in the middle. But these are two little 3-year-old German boys. And I chose this pair to show you because the little boy on the right kind of acts like the chimp. Now they're going to pull it in. Okay. And then he goes over just like the chimp. But you're going to see he doesn't take them all. Why not? He only takes a couple. See, there's still a couple left. And he actually puts them back. And that kid is saying, they're not on my side. So he comes over to the middle. He actually starts to take 3 of them. The other boy says, no. And they end up dividing them equally. And almost always, children divide these equally. Little 3-year-old children can't even count. But if they have 4, they know 2 and 2 is equal. They can see that it's not equal if it's 3 and 1 or 4 and 0. So they divide almost always equally. And if on some occasion, on a rare occasion, one of the children takes more than their fair share, the other guy will object and say, hey, what are you doing? And he'll hand it over to equalize. And you can actually, I actually have an example of that. Here are 2 little girls, and they're going to pull over. And they pull a little too hard, and they go down on the rug. I think that's why the one girl feels emboldened to take more than her share. But you're going to see she takes more than her share, and the other little girl objects, and she relinquishes. So she objects, and now she gives her, and so now it's equal. So they have mechanisms, not only they have a tendency to share equally, but they have mechanisms for correcting it. And usually with a normative protest, hey, you can't do that. You have to share, right? And the other girl says, oh, okay, you're right, right? That's a cooperative negotiation that you just aren't going to see in dominant chimps. And then here's the kind of ultimate. This is one of my favorite papers of all. If you know much about 3-year-olds, you'll know that they have a reputation for not really being very good at sharing. And the reason is because if you have your child with some toys and you say, share some with your friend, or if they have some cookies, share some with your friend, they really they don't share very well. But we found a situation where they will, and that is collaboration. So if they generate the rewards together, they feel a need to share them together. So watch what happens here. They're pulling together. This is a variation on that same apparatus. They're pulling together, and whoops, 3 to one side and 1 to the other side. And he hands it over. He freely relinquishes one of his 3. In a control condition, they come in, and it's already 3 on one side and 1 on the other. No collaboration. It's already there, 3 and 1, and they almost never give it up. So actually the title of this paper is Collaboration Facilitates Equal Sharing in Children, but not chimpanzees. So again, we have a chimpanzee version of this. Chimps aren't really good at sharing, so we had to rig up some things where a piece falls in the middle and he can dominate it or not. And the main point of the study is that the chimps don't care whether you help produce it or not, whether you're a free rider or you help produce it, they don't share it either way. Right? So participation doesn't, this child, the one who got 3, feels an obligation to share because we produce them together. And the only fair thing to do is share them together. And when they didn't produce them together, he doesn't feel that same obligation. And the chimp doesn't feel that obligation no matter what. So we think that this, I believe this is like a prototype of a situation in early human evolution where we're collaborating. And let's say we're collaborating to, catch a rabbit or something. And I'm the one who finally captures it, and you're over there somewhere. I could probably eat it all myself before you get here, but I don't and I feel an obligation that we do this together because we worked at it together. So I think that's really the sort of source of these normative feelings of commitment and obligation. I'm going to skip that one for time. So the This is another little diagram that's similar, but the one before I had the sort of joint. I had, the joint goal and joint attention with individual roles. That's kind of the cognitive side of this collaboration. This is the normative structure. All right. So we've got the collaboration again, but we make a joint commitment. And I say role ideals, meaning, okay, I say, hey, let's go hunt the antelope. Okay. And you say, okay, you're going to be the chaser. I'm going to be the bow and arrow guy. And you're going to play your role and I'm going to play my role. And just like those little girls who were pulling in and one of them played their role the wrong way, if you don't play your role in the normatively appropriate way, you're not chasing the antelope like you're supposed to. I say, hey, what are you doing? You have to chase him because we're doing this together and I'm depending on you. Okay. And so I like to conceptualize this, the normative, as we are regulating each of us individually. So when I say you must do it, where does the must come from? It comes from our joint commitment. We decided together, this is how we are going to do it, and you're not going along. And so I criticize you and I call you out and you respond to it because you feel responsible to me. Now, of course, you can just leave, but then you're not going to be my collaborative partner anymore. You're forfeiting your cooperative identity. If you break the commitment, it's okay to break the commitment if you ask permission. If I say, oh, okay, I'm sorry, listen, I got to go take care of my kid. I can't go antelope hunting today, then it's okay. If you don't play your part, I protest. And if I did something in there that's not good, I apologize or feel guilty after breaking my commitment. So these are all uniquely human attitudes and emotions and motivations that come with the collaboration evolutionarily. They are the emotional, motivational glue that holds this collaboration together. It's not just humans don't just work together because it seems like a good idea. They feel an obligation to partner when they do work together. So I actually talked to one of the classes here about morality, and I think I had this slide in that lecture as well. But so I like to say that the human moral relationships deriving from this kind of thing is that I can sometimes put you over me, where I can be sympathy and I can have sympathy for you and help you. You equals me is a notion of equality and fairness. And we over me is the sense of obligation and normativity. And that's where the legitimacy comes from, is that we agreed to do it a certain way. And now if I don't follow that, then I feel bad about that. So, and that we can either be a collaborative partner or a cultural group. So it can be a commitment to a partner, or it can be following the social norms of the group as a way of cooperating with the group as a whole. And I'm going to be very brief here and just mention the second step is the cultural group. And that's the emergence of a kind of a group mindedness. And there's a need to belong to the group. One of the phenomena in social psychology that's best established is that humans feel a need to belong to a group. There's a commitment to the group's social norms. Not only do I follow the group's social norms, but I enforce them when others don't conform. There's distributive societal justice in the culture. That doesn't always work, but the ideal is that there is some notion of fairness, whatever that might be, whether it's based on equality or based on merit or based on need. There is some notion of fairness. And excluding free riders is really kind of in-group favoritism. So just like in collaboration, I don't want people who didn't participate to take all the stuff that we worked hard at. I want the in-group to benefit more than anybody in the out-group. And I'm just going to show you one little video to show you children enforcing a social norm. This is a little rule. This little boy learned the rule of how to play this game, and then the puppet is going to do it the wrong way. And the puppet plays the game a different way. And the child is saying, it doesn't go like that. It doesn't go like that at all. Right? And so the child is not even playing the game. He's not affected, but he's enforcing the rule. And he says, no, it doesn't go like that. You have to do it this way. You have to do it. You have to take this. Right? So this is when you get to the group level. When somebody you call people out when they break the rules, and that's part of what keeps us cooperative as well. Is people not only following the norms but holding others to the norms as well. So. I'm sorry. I will show this very quickly. This is a little girl where this down on the floor you can see a little tower, and she was told, "Oh, this is very precious. Don't be careful about this." And then, sorry, but we psychologists are cruel. We rig it so that she's going to accidentally knock it over. So she's going to put this ball down this thing, and it's going to see it stops there. It hits there, and she pulls it out. And then we sort of get her to look the other way, and we open this little door. Now she's going to do it again, and you'll see what happened when she does it again. Oops, it knocks down the tower. And look at her. She feels guilty. And we have to build it again. And now the adult comes back. Uh-oh, it rolled out. She doesn't say I bumped it. It rolled out. It rolled out by itself on its own. All right. So she feels guilty about this, and she's trying to make up with it. So these 3-year-old children, again, already are trying to repair a collaboration that they are kind of responsible for it going off the rails a little bit. So again, just to summarize, this is my the third book in the trilogy, as he called it. I like that. I haven't called it that before. The third book in the trilogy is the ontogeny part of it. And so we have children in the 1 to 3 year age range, dual level collaboration, cooperative communication, joint commitment and fairness. And at 3 years, collective intentionality, cultural conventions and norms, conventional communication, commitment to groups. All right. So this is the kind of we see the human evolution unfolding in human ontogeny as well. So human children, to conclude, human children are adapted for collaboration, working together with others for mutual benefit in ways that other great apes are not. These adaptations are fundamental to uniquely human processes of cognition, communication, culture, and morality. And in ontogeny, a major shift to group-based normative functioning in many different domains of activity occurs at around 3 years of age. Okay, so that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michael, for your inspiring lecture with a lot of examples of experiments you conducted while you are in Germany. And I think you've convincingly shown us that human children are altruistic and cooperative in ways that chimpanzees and other great apes are not. Now, let me introduce the first commentator, Professor Se실lia Ri즈웨이. Sesillia is Professor Emerita of Sociology at Stanford University. Her concentration is social psychology. She is widely known for her research on status hierarchies in daily social interactions and eventually inequality in a society. She's also a recipient of many awards, including Cooley Mead Award and Jesse Bonnard Award. Sesillia served as a president of the American Sociological Association. Sesillia, it's your turn. You've got about 15 minutes.
So I really enjoyed Michael Tomasello's talk, and actually I find his account of how humans are adapted for acting and thinking cooperatively in cultural groups to be entirely persuasive. I'm not going to argue with it, but I'm going to talk about one of the internal complexities that develops. I want to talk about one of the fundamental social normative processes. Talked about these norms developing to manage these cooperative situations. I want to talk about some of the fundamental norms that develop out of those cooperative endeavors. And those are the cultural norms and shared beliefs that govern status hierarchies and status hierarchies themselves. The cultural schema of status that provides the rules connecting and coordinating status hierarchies is on the one hand, a brilliant social technology for achieving collective goals. And on the other hand, a system of inequality that creates a powerful potential for competition and conflict among individuals and groups. Decades of evidence have shown that status hierarchies develop in precisely those situations that Tomasello rightly points to as fundamental to the human condition, situations where people must work cooperatively together to achieve shared goals. Although we use status as a basic socio-normative tool for managing the cooperative interdependence we all face, and I totally agree about that, it is inherently a double-edged sword that brings its own nested conflicts, and that's kind of what I want to talk about. Status hierarchies are based on differences in esteem, honor, respect among individuals or between groups, and esteem typically brings influence in collective situations. Since we all depend on others for what we need and want in life, we care a great deal about how much we're valued and considered worthy in the eyes of groups and communities that we depend on. That is status. Evidence suggests that the desire for status is a fundamental human motive that affects well-being and even health and motivates a wide range of behavior, like belonging. Status is there too. When something matters as much to people as does their status in the eyes of others, it acts as a powerful incentive for their behavior. But by the same token, they will compete and even fight for it in some circumstances. Okay, so how are status hierarchies and the norms and beliefs that govern them a human invention to manage cooperative interdependence? Well, everybody has an unavoidable interest in forming cooperative endeavors, but everybody also has an interest in maximizing what they get from those endeavors. The status schema is a set of rules for organizing social relations, a normative set of rules for organizing social relations in order to manage this basic cooperative competitive tension that when we talked about people being better at than chimps, right, and produce collective outcomes. First part of the status schema is a basic, if implicit, norm of status. There's overwhelming evidence that status hierarchies follow a basic rule. Status and influence is granted to group members in proportion to their perceived value to the collective effort. You do more, you get more status, right? Do more for the group, you get more status. The norm of status manages the cooperative competitive tensions of collective goal efforts in several ways. Importantly, it provides a means by which the group exercises some control over a would-be dominator who threatens to take over the group. We saw some of that with those kids, right? The group without contributing to the shared endeavor. So I agree, this is normative process to bring that in, and this norm of status doesn't. But the norm also offers esteem and influence, right, for contributing to the group effort. And by doing so, it incentivizes group members to funnel their energy and aspirations into doing the best they can on the group's behalf, because they'll get more status and esteem. Finally, by granting influence in proportion to the perceived value of members' contributions, the status norm provides a system for resolving disagreements and combining individual contributions into a collective line of action, which aids goal attainment. If you just have two, that's one thing, but you often in human groups, you have bigger groups, and it's not that easy to come together on things. And how are we going to do this? Status helps do that. It's a key to doing it. For these reasons, status hierarchies have been called by a lot of researchers a boundedly functional solution to the problem of cooperative goal attainment. This is the sense in which status is a brilliant and useful social technology. But hierarchies created by the status norm are only ever boundedly functional because they are based on the perceived value of members' contributions, and perceptions are subject to bias and manipulation. This potential for bias and manipulation can come not only individual conflict among members, but injustice among members based on their social differences. This problem is brought to the fore by the second part of the status scheme, a part that is as functionally necessary for status hierarchies to work as is the norm of status. The norm of status prescribes deference to others on the basis of perceived value to the group, but that demand immediately confronts the individual member with a second question. How can she figure out what her fellow members will take to be the signs of greater or lesser value to the group so that she knows how to act appropriately? I argue that people solve this coordination problem by developing shared cultural status beliefs about the differentiating social attributes and behaviors that in their culture are taken to indicate higher or lower levels of status worthiness and different types of goal-related competence. People like this usually are higher status and are better at this usually than people like that. Evidence shows that people form status beliefs about social differences among them quite easily like that. I've done experiments like that. They can form these beliefs, right? Also, the beliefs like that are widespread in societies. And in the U.S., for instance, status beliefs, there's evidence that status beliefs are embedded in the widely held stereotypes of all the major groups by which inequality is patterned. This includes gender, race, education, occupation, all have status beliefs in them, saying one group is higher status than the other. These common knowledge status beliefs serve as ready bases for coordinating judgments of value to the group, allowing group members to quickly form status hierarchy so that they function for goal attainment, to be able to come together and organize themselves like that. I'm arguing then that the cultural schema that governs status hierarchies has two parts. There's a taken for granted, but fundamental status norm that people learn from experience, like those kids, learn from experience and pass on to others through their behavior. People combine this deeper, more implicit normative rule with a more explicit, variable, culturally specific, and historically changing set of shared cultural status beliefs that they use to anticipate what others will see as better, more competent, and more valuable in various situations. Now, status beliefs are not about us and them between entirely separate groups. They're not about the Ukrainians and the Russians, right? Instead, they're about readily apparent social differences among people within a community or society, people who must deal with one another cooperatively. That's what makes them useful for status hierarchy. Gender, of course, is a classic example of such a within community difference, but so can be race or region or religion or education. Status beliefs work to quickly coordinate behavior because they're shortcuts, simplified stereotypes. People like this are usually better at these kinds of things than people like that, right? But as stereotypes, they introduce bias and inaccuracy into perceptions of value to the group. Not everybody like that is better. And this not only reduces the effectiveness of status hierarchies as a tool for collective goal attainment, it also introduces injustice. It also introduces injustice to the inequalities in esteem and honor that the status hierarchies hand out, that they distribute. Biased by status beliefs, these differences in esteem and respect in real-life status hierarchies are rarely fully deserved in terms of actual value to the group. We all know that from our life, all the things we've taken part of. But this creates a potential for conflict. And here we see how status processes are inherently double-edged, a double-edged sword that both helps organize the cooperative endeavors and sows the seeds of competition and conflict within the endeavors. As common knowledge cultural beliefs, it's a hallmark of status beliefs that they are generally accepted as a matter of social reality by those they cast as low status. I know people think people like me are low status, right? They cast as low status as well as those they give in high status. In other words, they're widely accepted in a society. In that way, status beliefs legitimate the biases that they introduce into status hierarchy. And that, in turn, blunts perceptions of injustice and constrains conflict. But there are limits on the constraint. Those who belong to social difference groups that are devalued by status beliefs, such as women or a devalued racial group, have an interest in seeing through the status beliefs and organizing to change them. And this interest creates a kind of churning potential for conflict in a society. The very situations that make us human, cooperative interdependence to achieve needed and valued goals, also foster status inequality. And status inequality is inherently a double-edged sword. On the one hand, status can be a powerful technology for motivating people and organizing them to work effectively together to accomplish their goals. Go to the moon, something brilliant like that, right? Can help people organize in that way. On the other hand, the same motivating power of status creates competitive tensions, and simplified status beliefs introduce bias and injustice that potentially feeds those tensions. In this way, status hierarchies, for all their values, bring a serpent into the garden of cooperation within a group or community. That's my line.
Much, Cecilia. It's so wonderful to see the two great scholars in psychology on one hand, in sociology on the other, engage with each other. You actually basically conquered with Michael that human cooperative activities and interdependence lead to cooperation and stability. But you made the case that human interdependence fosters status inequality and subsequently social conflict. And I like the term you proposed and you have long advocated, which is status beliefs, that tells us a lot about what's happening in our world. And status beliefs are likely to introduce biases and stereotypes that could really make social relationships really complicated and more conflict laden. And then I like your last metaphor you introduced us, which is about the serpent that is brought into the garden of cooperation, the garden of Adam and Eve and whatever. There's a serpent, right? That's the some component that makes human cooperation more complicated. I have a quick question for you, Cecilia. I mean, the tendency toward building social hierarchy, as you said, is a fundamental foundation of humans. But does it come naturally, or is it learned?
I believe it's more or less learned. I very much agree with Michael that people had these kind of a baseline evolutionary set of adaptations that allowed them to develop culture, and then culture takes over, and the culture from early on runs things. I think that these rules of status, right, are a cultural invention that work together with the evolutionary ones to help people manage and these cooperative interdependence things. So I think it is learned. It's learned early. So you see those 3-year-olds learning it, right? Learning those kinds of things. It's learned early and goes from there. Now, they don't get the details and went early on, and they don't know society's cultural status beliefs early on. But they do get the basic ideas of these coordination things.
I don't know what you're.
Go ahead.
Go
I
ahead.
was going to ask a question, but I didn't know if that was allowed in the format or not.
It's okay. Michael, go ahead.
Cecilia, I wondered, I thought I had when you were talking there was, could a lot of it still be interpreted in the context of interdependence, in the sense that the more valued individuals are the ones that they're doing jobs that other people couldn't do. So anyone can do the janitor's job because all of us are capable of sweeping the floor. But going to the moon, only some of us know the mathematics to do the high level stuff, but all of us can do the low level stuff. So I depend on you more than you depend on me, because you can do my job, but I can't do your job.
Well, that's some of it, but it does depend on what the circumstance is. And sometimes it's simply a matter of some people can simply do it better, right? Because you can get a status hierarchy in a group that's planning a party, right?
Yeah, okay.
In other words, it doesn't have to be about going to the moon. And people, probably anybody can plan the party, but some You have
I
the
see.
idea, but so-and-so is really good at it. And if we do this, we can have a better party and we'll all have more
Okay,
fun.
good.
So
Good.
there is a more shared, right? You're creating the status hierarchy. It helps you create a bigger pot of what we all get because we do a better job of it. We get more stuff, And of course it can be, use the example of hunting and stuff. We get, some people are really good at tracking this kind of animal. So for this situation, that person, we push them out front, right? But a different other kind of animal, another person goes out front,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
something like that.
yeah,
Right?
yeah. Okay,
That's
great.
increasing the pot. Increasing the pot. Mhm.
Yeah. Interesting.
All right. Thank you so much.
Distribute the pot, usually not strictly equally. Because
Yeah.
usually the higher status people give a little more. Mhm.
Thank you so much. We're getting, into the heated discussion already. I'm looking forward to the continuing hot debate during the conversation period. Before we move into the conversation period, now let me introduce the second commentator, Emily Liu. Emily is a professor of law at the USC Gold School of Law. She served as a law clerk to the Honorable Margaret McQueen of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and practiced law at the international law firm of Clory, Gottlieb, Steen, and Hamilton. Emily, the floor is yours. You've got about 10 minutes.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here with everyone, especially Michael and Cecilia. So, as Jumbo mentioned, I'm a socio-legal scholar, and I specialize in empirical research, looking at legal institutions, but in particular in the context of international migration. And a lot of my studies focus on U.S. immigration law and policy. And in particular, we looked at issues that are relating to legal non-compliance, when people break the law, or in my empirical context, what a lot of non-academics typically refer to as illegal immigration. That's one of my main areas of focus. I also study legal enforcement, so the opposite side of the coin of legal non-compliance. And there I study a lot of what happens when immigrants are detained, immigration detention. And then the last thing that I'll mention I've spent a lot of time thinking about and researching is administrative adjudication, especially in the context of how immigration judges and immigration courts render their decisions. So Michael has given us this very I think very persuasive and powerful account of what sets us apart as humans and what makes us really unique. And that's the ability to engage in social coordination to achieve collaboration, communication, and social learning of all types. And what I thought might be useful, hopefully, is to share with you one thing that I've found to be quite striking when I apply Michael's insights to some of my own research and topics of interest for me. And that is what I noticed is this conspicuous absence in our immigration regime of some of the fundamental building blocks of human collaboration that Michael has talked about. And so I'll just quickly focus on two of them. One is shared intentionality, and the other is perspective shifting. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that if, regulating international migration were a collaborative game, a very high stakes game with really deep and enduring human consequences, of course, we've really failed at that game in lots of ways. So I want to spend the next few minutes sort of illustrating that point with respect to what happens with some of our policies, and then laying out for us what the consequences have been of building a system that is missing those fundamental pieces. And then I'll also point out along the way some of the community responses that I've been a part of, that I've seen, that I've studied, that have emerged in response to that gaping aspect of our immigration regime, and community responses that I think really very nicely illustrate in some ways what's possible when cooperation happens of the type that Michael has talked about. So one quality that's really defined our immigration regime as it's developed over the past few decades is this lack of what Michael calls shared intentionality. And what I mean by that is our policymakers really don't view the regulation of international migration as a collaborative task in any way. Collaborative task where we recognize that countries are very much interdependent and have to rely on one another, and that we share a common goal of facilitating as best as we can and in as humane a way as we can, movement of people across boundaries, across territorial boundaries, across borders, so that it's very much in each country's interest, self-interest as well as mutual interest, to coordinate one another to achieve that common goal. And so you can think of this as, a type of a collaborative game. But instead, our immigration regime has evolved in an exactly opposite direction, I think, in some ways, of drawing lines, very sort of bright lines between us against them, making sure that we protect our land, our resources from their people, building physical walls. So, I would argue that our current immigration regime is all about competition in lots of ways, how we get to protect what we have on this side of the border, no matter what the cost is to the other side. And the basic orientation that we have adopted is that of me over you, basically. But what's ironic, I think, about that is we, live in this really highly globalized world where we take for granted that we have to share or we have to trade goods, things across borders, and that coordination and cooperation is not just desired, but that it's necessary to engage in that kind of trade in that system. But suddenly when we talk about the flow of people across territorial boundaries, everything seems to change. But in any case, the result of this lack of shared intentionality in our immigration regime has been a system that's become increasingly harsh and punitive over the years. And I mean that in a very literal sense. And so we have a system that triggers removal or deportation proceedings, even against lawful permanent residents who have deep social ties, deep family ties, who have built lives for themselves in the United States for pretty much all their lives. I've seen that happen. We also have one of the largest civil detention systems in the world, in which we place tens of thousands of immigrants who are in deportation proceedings in actual jails or private facilities that are built, modeled after jails for indefinite periods of time, even though violating immigration law is not a criminal offense, but it's a civil offense. I've conducted a lot of surveys and interviews with detainees over the years, and one of the most common themes that emerge from those conversations with detainees is that they very much experience this process as punishment. That is extraordinarily traumatizing and very dehumanizing. And to make that situation even more untenable, the detainees are not guaranteed a right to an appointed counsel, unlike criminal defendants. And so they have to fight the government pretty much on their own if they can't afford to hire an attorney, which is the case for many detainees. So one response from the community members that view the system as violating basic norms of fairness and equality and due process has been to develop a coordinated network of lawyers and social workers, translators, psychiatrists, paralegals, just pulling all sorts of professionals and people, volunteers across from communities to bring them together who have to coordinate very closely as a team to represent a detainee whom they've never really, they've not met each other. The team members have not met each other or worked with each other in the past. But those teams actually work, and I've been parts of them because the members treat each other as equal partners, regardless of whether you're a lawyer or paralegal or a translator, because we see that each other as contributing an essential component of what's needed to represent this detainee whom they've been assigned. So in the teams that I've been part of, this dynamic is very much characterized by a we over me type of orientation that Michael has talked about. The second thing that I'll quickly highlight that I think is conspicuously missing from our current regime is this basic quality that sets humans apart is perspective shifting, and that is really essential to collaboration. So as a graduate student, my sort of introduction to that concept came when I was doing field work in Mexico for my dissertation project. And I had gone to a Mexican village to pre-test a survey instrument that I had developed to try to understand why people were taking this really dangerous journey to cross the border without documents, and how they've sort of come to view the U.S. legal system in that context, and how they view themselves in light of their intentions to undertake this illegal act. And during that trip, I met a man who he was a storekeeper, and I remember asking why he was planning to cross the border, knowing that it was so dangerous and knowing that it was illegal to do that. And I was pregnant at the time, and I was showing, and he said to me, you're going to have a baby soon. And when you have that baby, you're going to understand what desperation feels like when you cannot give your child what he needs. At that point, you'll do anything and go anywhere to find work to provide for your child. I'm no different, he said. I do this out of necessity, and you'll understand that when you have your baby. And I have to say, he was right. I have come to understand that perspective in a very real way. I have 2 boys. In terms of U.S. immigration policy, I'll just share one dramatic example of what could happen when policymakers are so blinded by their narrow perspective in developing a policy that they fail to even consider that there might be other very different perspectives about the same phenomenon that people are very deeply committed to, very deeply wedded to. And that example is the zero tolerance policy that was implemented at the U.S.-Mexico border a few years ago in 2018 by the Trump administration. So under that policy, all immigrants, including asylum seekers who attempted to cross the U.S.-Mexico border, were detained, and they were criminally prosecuted. And in that process, thousands of migrant children who were with their migrant parents were separated from the parents. And that policy caused enormous public outcry and protest, and it was eventually terminated. But not before it had this unintended consequence, unintended by the Trump administration, I think, of generating this really amazing, unprecedented level of cooperation across many different kinds of communities across the country, who really came together to organize what are called bail funds, to raise millions of dollars in a matter of weeks, if not days, to bail out the detained migrant parents so that they could be reunited with their children. As to whether the government was actually able to reunite them is another question, but the money was being raised in order to pay for their bail, to help in that process. And afterwards, I interviewed some of the bail fund organizers, and even they were amazed by the speed and the commitment with which the community members came together, oftentimes community members who did not even know each other, to organize these events to raise the funds. But the only thing that really united them was their shared goal of making sure that these migrant families stayed together, that they came back together. What really galvanized that kind of outpouring of coordinated effort on the part of many different members of communities was this we over me orientation, right? We in the broad sense of families, right? Regardless of our nationalities, regardless of our legal status. So some of these things that I've talked about just now that I think are really missing from our immigration regime are qualities that, Michael has talked about as human children acquiring naturally as part of their developmental process. So it's a little depressing to me, and I'm not quite sure what it says about human adults that these basic qualities are so lacking in our system that we have built for ourselves for regulating some of the most sort of meeting some of the most basic needs and instincts, which is movement, right, across land, across borders. So I think it's going to take a lot to go from this current regime that we have right now to a collaborative system in which we might be able to adopt a much more expansive view of who the we is that we're including, and to try to develop policies that recognize that our fates are really interlinked and dependent on one another, regardless of which side of the border we happen to live in. So those are some of my sort of thoughts that occurred to me as I was thinking about Michael's work and trying to think about how it applies in the context that I study. And I hope that's sort of given us some additional things to think about.
Thank you, Emily. I really can't tell how grateful I am to you because you provided a viable example of cooperation in the field of international migration. You really flexibly worked with Michael's key concepts like shared intentionality and perspective taking. And then to see to what extent these building blocks of cooperation have been working to achieve the shared goal of processing immigration. That's a fantastic example. I don't think we have much of time for doing conversation, but definitely I should give Michael an opportunity to respond to both the Cecilia and Emily's comments before we a little bit spend time for a little bit of conversation. Michael.
Let me just say that I'm fantastic. I just had not thought, Emily, of things in that context. But one thing that occurred to me when you were talking is that it reminded me of Cecilia's asymmetries in status. That is, there's some countries that everybody wants to migrate to, and there are other countries that not so many people want to migrate to. And so it's this asymmetry that creates a lot of the problem that we're doing fine like we are, okay? So why do we need you to come in here? And on the other hand, the people who want to immigrate are desperate, as you said, sometimes. So there's this asymmetry of not just status, but of resources and everything else that really creates a lot of the problem. So that's a really interesting example. And I guess I'm a dreamer from the 60s, and I wonder with John Lennon, imagine what if we just got rid of borders? What do you think would happen? I know that it's not possible, but as a thought experiment, what if we just got rid of borders and people could go wherever they want? If you had a place with a lot of resources, there might be an initial period where everybody goes there, but then there are too many people competing for the resources, so they go somewhere else. And it seems like there might be some balance at some point if we just got rid of borders. I don't think it's on the horizon, but anyway. So anyway, thank you very much for that, Emily. That was great.
All right. Thank you. So we have about 3 minutes left. So I'm going to ask you one final question, unfortunately. It seems like three of you all agree that altruistic tendency in small group interactions is far from being a panacea for making humans thrive. So, and then my question is, what would be the solutions for maximizing the real capacities of humans to collaborate, or for minimizing the errors and biases and self-centeredness? That question goes to every one of you, and each of you has 1 minute to respond.
Going to solve all the world's problems in 1 minute. I will just say that this in-group, out-group psychology sort of grew up with the emergence of cultural groups, and this asymmetry in status was exacerbated with the civilization and stratified societies, etc. And they are things that we carry with us, and we can't ignore them. If we're going to solve this, we have to take the science seriously and understand that people have in-group, out-group biases, and there are status hierarchies, and that we're going to have to work around that for our solutions.
Thank you.
I would say, just joining in on that, what I would say is that I think status hierarchies you're not going to get rid of, but they can be overlapping. So the same people you can, and this will challenge some of the status beliefs. The same people are not high status almost all the time versus the other people, and they basically unconsolidate that and become more egalitarian. Right, in that sense, more control over the inequality. Actually, I do think that's where you get the hanging on, and just like some countries super rich, others poor for the immigration problem. If they're closer, then all that becomes more. All the forms of cooperation become easier, become more likely, and you can reduce the conflict. So there are things we have to do, but the answer is to reduce inequality.
Okay, thank you for that.
I agree with that. I think altruism for me, it's based on the impulse to help people, right? To feel sympathy for them and to lend a hand. And that is very different, I think, than the idea of helping people to empower themselves, to help themselves. And that second idea is much more closer to trying to, sort of come to each other as equal partners, and equally deserving of good life, and to try to communicate in those terms. And I think that's somewhat different than altruism, and not somewhat different, very different, I think. And so that has to be a different starting point, I think, for conversation.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I think that altruism and sympathy is one thing, but respect is another. And so
right.
In a lot of these, a lot of the conflicts we have in our societies, it would be like, I don't care if you don't like me, but you have to respect me. Okay. So the liking, it's nice to be liked, but in a public context, the main thing is that you respect that I'm equally deserving as everybody else. So I absolutely agree with that.